Hey folks, welcome back to West Yorkshire Retro Gamer. Again, I have to apologise, I'm still full of a cold at the minute, so any coughing or choking or whatever, I apologise in advance. So, Leeds' current predicament is one where I feel Leeds need to try and play something a little different. What have Leeds got to lose at this stage? Everything they've tried so far for the majority of the season hasn't worked, hence why we are not in the position that maybe Sunderland are in, for example. I'm not particularly greedy. I would be quite content as long as we just had a significant gap between ourselves and the relegation zone, but that points gap is getting smaller, and it concerns me now because the run of games we've got coming up is pretty bad in terms of the calibre of the opposition. So, could Farke potentially ditch the 4-3-3 and try something that for years was absolutely fine? The 4-4-2. It's a formation I dearly miss. It worked for donkey's years, and quite frankly, all these fancy foreign formations that have come in from other countries and are now used in England because 3/4 of the managers are foreign anyway. All your 4-2-3-1s and your 4-5-1s, your 4-3-3s, whatever, 3-5-2s. Come on now. 4-4-2 was always a very balanced formation, and if you've got the right players in there, then you can make it work. Leeds started the season keeping clean sheets, and then when they realised they weren't scoring enough goals, they tried changing things up, and now we're not scoring that many goals, but we are conceding a shed load. So something's got to change. So I've come up with two different Leeds United 11's here. Now it's a bit of a mix. It's not necessarily saying what could be the best 11 for Leeds United, but just possibly 11's that could work. So this is what we're having a look at here. So this 11, ironically, is the 10 new signings that we made in the summer, plus Jack Harrison, who didn't play for Leeds United last season. Now, I did do a video on this particular 11 some time ago, but the situation back then was different. So let's have a quick look at it. Lucas Perry's been brought in for 15 million quid to be the #1 goalkeeper, so you'd expect him to play. James Justin came in for 8 million quid at right back, and he's been back up to Jayden Bogle, which is fair enough in a sense because Bogle has been pretty good for Leeds over the last couple of seasons. Seb Bornau was only bought for about 5 million quid and hasn't had a look in yet. Played in the cup game against Wednesday and didn't look brilliant, but again, nobody looked brilliant in that match. Yacobiol has recently replaced Pascal Struijk on the left centre-back position. He hasn't really, nothing's really changed from a positive point of view in terms of keeping the goals out. So it could be argued that putting Biol in there hasn't really helped. Maybe Pascal Struijk needs to come back in, perhaps. But again, we paid 17 million for Biol, so it's a lot of money to sit on a bench. Gabby Gudmundsson, being one of Leeds' best players this season, by quite some distance as well, I would say, has ended up being a more than adequate replacement for Junior Firpo. Maybe a tiny bit less attack-minded, but far better defensive-minded. I know we've conceded a lot of goals recently, but that's not really been down to Gabby Gudmundsson. He's been very, very good, very impressive, and for 11 million quid, we can't really grumble. So, moving on to the midfield. Now, I've obviously had to put Jack Harrison at right wing due to the fact that Noah Okafor's been been brought in as a left winger. Harrison's he's more of an old-fashioned left winger, really, in the sense that he's actually quite good on the ball. His technical ability is actually quite good. The ball control and everything. Certainly when he was playing under Marcelo Bielsa, we got to see one of the best versions of Jack Harrison. His best goal and assist output for a season was 8 goals and 8 assists in the Premier League. If we could get Jack Harrison back to that level, then it'd be great. Do I think that that's likely to happen with Harrison? I would doubt. Certainly not under Farke. If we had a different manager, maybe. But Farke ain't going to get that kind of output from Harrison. Not the right manager for him, I don't think. But he effectively will go on the right, and Harrison's not really been tried on the right, where he'd have the opportunity to cut inside on his left foot and maybe get some shots in. No, he's more traditionally a winger that would stick to that left touch line and get some crosses in with his left foot. But for the purpose of this exercise, we're doing this to try something different. So why not try Jack on the right? Centre midfield then is the 2 new centre midfielders that we signed in Sean Longstaff and Anton Stack. I've given Longstaff the captaincy. He's had 170 games in the Premier League for Newcastle. I mean, it's not bad, is it? He's quite vocal on the pitch as well. So he'd probably make a fairly decent captain if required. Now there's potential with Longstaff and Stack as a midfield. There's good size there. Both are quite happy putting in a tackle, making a pass, putting a header in. So maybe them two as a partnership could work. Noah Okafor on the left wing. Certainly one of our better signings so far. Chipped in with a couple of goals, couple of assists. You can see that he's good on the ball. Looks a very solid left winger, and for 19 million quid, I don't think it's a bad buy. Longstaff we got for about 12, and Stack we got for about 18, I think, if I remember right. I can't exactly remember how much we actually bought Harrison for, because it was that long ago now. They had 3 loan spells with Leeds, and then they made it permanent. I think they made it permanent for about 10, 11, 12 million. But they'd have obviously paid loan fees for 3 seasons in a row as well, I would have thought. And then up front, literally paid the same amount as you would pay for a packet of ready salted Seabrooks crisps and a Galaxy chocolate bar. In other words, they were both free. And I'm not saying you buy crisps or chocolate for free, but you get the idea. There was no transfer fee involved for Lucas Mecha or Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And what could these two provide as a 2 up front partnership? Well, you've got 2 players that are comfortable aerially, especially Calvert-Lewin. Seems very good at winning his headers. Mecha, he has a bit of a lanky style about him, but he's got a good shot on him. The goal against Forest was an excellent finish, and he was very cool with taking the penalty in the first game of the season against Everton. If you get Mecha in the right place, if you can get some shots off, maybe he could get a few goals. I checked his stats earlier before recording this video, and he had a season where he got something like 18 goals in 38 games for Anderlecht. The guy can score if you get him in right areas. Now I'm not saying that getting 18 in 38 for Anderlecht is world beating or even Premier League level. It's not. It's Belgian Pro League for one of Belgium's best teams. But there is some evidence there. Same with Calvert-Lewin if you go back a few seasons. One of his seasons with Everton, ended up getting a very decent goal tally to game ratio. I can't exactly remember what it was now. Might have been about 15 goals in 30 games or something like that. You know, so the two of them in the past have shown that they're capable, but we need them to click ASA bloody P. We need them both to start scoring goals. You can let Metcher off a little bit. He's not started many games. You know, Calvert-Lewin's started 3/4 of the games we've played this season. You know, and he's only got 1 goal. Metcher's already got 2 goals, and he's played less minutes. So, you know, read into that all you like, but I mean, ultimately, you know, it's got to be argued that certainly from a goal output, Metcher has provided slightly more than Calvert-Lewin so far. But again, both of them, you know, they haven't set the world alight yet. You know, we haven't. You know, we don't currently possess a striker that's got 5 goals in 10 games, for example. You know, which would be a very solid return at this stage of the season. So, you know, this is the first potential lineup that I've come up with. You know, could this work in a modern day Premier League fixture? Could a 4-4-2 work, and could it work with this selection of player? You know, this is a big physical side, this, right? There is no player in that lineup shorter than 5'10". Questionable about Harrison maybe on height, but he won't be much below 5'10". You know, so there's no. What I'm saying is there's no mega short asses in this squad, right? So you know, you'd like to think you've got the physical side of things ticked. Have you got enough technical on the, you know, in this lineup? I would say possibly, yeah. You know, Okafor and Harrison on the wings are both very comfortable with the ball at their feet. Longstaff and Stack, as I said before, very capable of picking out a good pass. Gudmundsson, excellent on that left side. Like, Gudmundsson and Okafor could be a £30 million quality left side. It really could. I would actually argue already that it has the potential to be a top 10 Premier League left side. Okafor and Gudmundsson. I would go as far as saying that. I really would. I think I've seen enough from this first just short of a dozen games to think that maybe these two, you know, really could be a very good partnership on that left hand side. So, you know, I mean, what's the chances of this happening? Absolutely zip under Farke. He ain't going to play a 4-4-2 as long as I've got an hole in my backside, quite frankly. I don't see it. You know, he's already ditched the 4-2-3-1 in favour of a 4-3-3, which, again, I mean, you could argue a few things here. You know, defensively, do we go more into a 4-5-1 and then offensively more into a 4-3-3? You know, in and out of possession, that kind of thing. I would say so, just about. I do feel that when we attack, we need to get more players forward. You know, get more players into the box, get more attacking service in there. The only problem is that the players, I don't know if it's a fitness issue or what, but they don't then get back quick enough. And maybe it's because these players, you know, the players on this list here, none of them are super quick. And maybe that's the reason why. But you could quite easily, even on a 4-4-2, right? Already having 2 strikers up front instead of 1 gives you more of a focal point. So if you get the ball to Okafor or Harrison and they can get a cross into that box, you've already got Metcher and Calvert-Lewin up there. You can then afford to maybe have Longstaff pushing further forward. Have Stack at the back, protecting the back 4. You know, you could have Gudmundsson and Justin overlapping the wingers as well. So you've then got Stack, Biol and Bourne out, all at the back in case the opposition counters. You know, I'm no football expert, but I know the basics. And it, you know, it's like I just don't understand. I don't understand what's changed so much over these recent games. And why we're so bad away. Why are we so bad away from home? Right? At home we look quite good, but away from home we're dire. You know, it's a, it's 100-yard by 50-yard football pitch, or whatever the measurements are these days. It's grass, it's mud, or ground, gravel, whatever, soil. It's the same white paint that gets painted on that paints the lines on the pitch. The goals are all made of the same metal with some white paint on and netted goals. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing on these grounds, nothing on these pitches that gives the home team an advantage in terms of when you are on that pitch. There might be a small amount of difference in quality of the pitch, possibly, but we're talking Premier League level here. All of the pitches should be quality control checked before the season starts. Some grounds literally put a new layer of grass, a new layer of turf all across the pitch. I think Leeds got one of Tottenham's spare turfs up, at one point. Weirdly, I don't know why, but yeah, I'm fairly certain that occurred at some point. So, the only difference really is being in front of your home fans. But when you're on that pitch, you've got to block it out. If you're away from home, and if you go to a volatile ground, and there's not many volatile grounds in the Premier League. There's not like a Millwall's Den in the Premier League, is there? Where fans are really on top of you and start shouting abuse at you. So there's no excuse. Home or away, and it's same with, like, it really winds me up when people say, "Oh, we've got to make the most of our home form." Like, it's 3 points. Doesn't matter if you get 3 points at home or 3 points away, it's still 3 points. If you draw, it's still 1 point. If you lose, it's still a big fat donut. Right? I mean, come on. Let's be real. The only reason why it's important to be better at home is because you have got nearly 40,000 Leeds fans. Going back a few seasons, it was 40,000 until Ken Bates decided to put his own bloody personal sauna in bloody Stand. And that knocked it down to about 37,000, didn't it? But ultimately, anyway, regardless of that, you've got, when you take into account there might be some away fans that come to the ground. So you're still talking over, 33 to 35,000 shouting, screaming Leeds fans, getting behind you, singing Marching On Together and all of the other Leeds songs. You've got to feel good as a Leeds player when you go onto that pitch when you hear all that. Surely. Outside of football, you're getting paid a really juicy contract to play football in the Premier League, the top league of English football, in front of 30-odd thousand fans. Living high life, in my opinion, but hey, that's just my opinion. So, anyway, I digress. So, this is the first 11, the first of the two 11s that I've put together here. Moving on to the second 11. Now, this is a little controversial, and before anyone says anything, that is a picture of Archie Gray up front, not Harry Gray. But unfortunately, Lineup Builder does not have a picture of Harry Gray at this moment in time. So I've had to put Archie in there, but for the purpose of the exercise, it's representing Harry Gray. Okay, so with all that being said, let's delve into it. So, Carl Darlow, he's played a few games this season. Was he at fault for the goals conceded? I feel a bit hit and miss on it. And I always kind of feel that when Leeds concede a goal, I always say, could the outfielders have done more to stop it going past the goalkeeper in the first place? How many world-class goals have been scored against Leeds United this season? Not many. So that's my argument. If someone picks up the ball, they're heavily marked, but they kind of, do some skill or some trick to get around that defence and get a 30-yard shot away that's so powerful and so into the top corner that not even a 7-foot goalkeeper would be able to reach it, let alone what we've got, fine. That's a world-class goal that has just been very well crafted by the opponent. Right? Has that happened to Leeds United this season? Not often. Not often at all. I think out of all the goals we've conceded, I can maybe count 2 that were very, very good goals. And that there might not have been much that Leeds could have done, to prevent them. So, anyway. So Darlow would be the alternative goalkeeper. We do still have Lemelier on the book, and we also have Alex Cairns, who ironically recently played a Leeds United under-21 game because Leeds United's 2 under-21 goalkeepers were both out on loan, and it wasn't deemed that any of Leeds' under-18 goalkeepers could have filled the void there. And it gave Cairns an opportunity to get some football. He hasn't played a competitive game in yonks, so, why the heck not? Good experience there, to have the likes of Cairns in goal and Howson at centre-back, and was there another overage player that played in that match as well? There might have been. Can't remember now. Anyway, so, would I have any of those 3 goalkeepers ahead of Lucas Perry? For myself personally, probably not. I think that in time we will see a good goalkeeper in Lucas Perry. Made a couple of very good saves in in the last match. You could argue he was maybe at fault for a couple of the goals that we conceded against Forest as well, but I'd probably have Perry over Darlow. Right back, in the other lineup it was James Justin. In this one we've got Jayden Bogle. As you can see with this lineup as well, it's predominantly a lineup from last season, minus Harry Gray, who was coming through the youth ranks at the time. I would probably have Bogle over Justin. James Justin, to be fair to him, hasn't done a lot wrong when he's come on as a substitute, to be fair to him. So a solid backup, but I think Bogle does provide a pretty decent outlet on that right hand side. Hello Kirby, here I go. Centre backs, Joe Rodon had a very good season so far, even though we've conceded a lot of goals. He's definitely he's looking the part, is Joe Rodon. Would I have Rodon ahead of Bornau? Yes, I would say so. And again, Seb Bornau, very difficult to judge the fella. He's hardly played. We would need to have a far bigger sample size of what Seb Bornau can do before we can realistically judge him. But because we have seen an extremely good sample size of Joe Rodon, we would have to go with Joe at centre-back. Pascal Struijk. You could argue that he's made a couple of mistakes and that kind of let Jacobiol back into the 11, or let him into the 11 in the first place. Kirby does like to jump up, folks, so I do apologise. She's getting on a bit now. She's about 15. Are you about 15 now, Curbs? You're about 15-year-old, aren't you? You're getting on a bit, girl. You're at least 14. I lost count now. But she's doing all right, bless her. So I can understand why Farke brought Biol into the squad, into the lineup in recent games. But I think that if you coach Struijk to be a little more aggressive in the challenges, you don't have to foul the player, but don't keep backing off. You know, close them down, charge them down. Pascal's a big boy, you know what I mean? You know, him and Rodon, there was chunkified as be all and ball now. So there's no reason why Pascal Strout can't be more aggressive in the challenge to kind of prevent the attacks coming through. And Pascal's proven in the past as well that from an aerial point of view, defensively and from an attacking point of view, he can be excellent. Now, would I have Strauch over Biol based on the fact that we have seen a little bit of Biol now? I think I probably would have Strauch over Biol, if I'm honest. I think I would. I think most people wouldn't. But I don't think that it's a lack of ability from Pascal Strauch. I think he needs to be coached a little differently. So that's down to Farke. Sam Byram, I mean, you know, Byram's more of a right back than a left back. And if Sam comes in and plays, I've got no problems with Sam Byram coming in. He's reliable, he's dependable, and he's highly experienced. But would I have him in over Gudmundsson? Not a chance. Not a chance. I like you, Sam. You're a great servant to the club. I love you too, Kirby. Yeah, like so Sam is the right kind of player you want as a backup fullback. Just a reliable player, someone that you can bring on. You know, like if you've got a lead and you just want someone that's experienced and has seen a lot in the game, you know, Sam's a good one to bring on. And you know, like James Justin has that versatility. You know, that can play both left back and right back. But he ain't getting ahead of Gudmundsson, not a chance. Dan James. Dan James is a very direct winger with a shed ton of pace, and a bit like a right-footed Harrison in a way. Likes to stick with his stronger foot. He's not the kind of winger that cuts inside. He likes to get down the byline and then whip those crosses in. So for Dan James, it's like, you know, does he get in ahead of Harrison? I would say so. Harrison, you know, with the good ball control and the tricks that he can do occasionally, you know, is probably more, you know, with who we currently have, is probably a better backup. And certainly for the right hand side, you'd have Dan James over Jack Harrison. You know, you could consider Jack Harrison on the left hand side, but probably less likely on the right. But again, we're putting these 11s together so that we can try something different, because obviously what we're doing at the moment ain't working. So, you know, you could argue that point. I'll come back to the midfield in a minute. I'll go to the other wing. So Willie Gnonto, you know, he's been used more as a left winger, but he actually looks quite comfortable on the right hand side, and for a brief time was forming a nice partnership with Bogle on the right hand side. Now Gnonto at his best is a very decent winger and can chip in with goals and assists. Can be very clinical at times. He's just not consistent enough with it. If Gnonto was consistent enough, I mean, you know, we'd have a very good player on his hands. He's still very young, we have to remember that. He's still only about 22. You know, he's got an absolute shed ton of time to improve. You know, he got capped by the full Italy team. You know, when he was like 18, 19, for Christ's sake. Yeah, so he's had a lot of pressure on him, and obviously Leeds signed him when they were last in the Premier League, and it was kind of, you know, again, there was a lot of pressure on him, and when he did play, you know, like, teams didn't know how to deal with him. You know, it was very good. He's gone off the boil a bit since, but you can tell that when he's in full flow and when he's playing confidently, Willie Gnonto's a very capable and very, very, very confident, very competent left winger. Well, winger in general, whether it be on the left or the right. So you could actually argue the toss. Could you use Dan James or Willie Nonto or Jack Harrison? For either of the wings. I guess it just depends on how you want to play. If you want the two most direct players, you would have Harrison on the left and James on the right. If you want more creative stuff, you have Okafor on the left and Nonto on the right. So it really depends on how you want to play. In the middle, I've gone with Ampadu and Tanaka. Ampadu would obviously sit as that anchor man in front of Strauch and Rodon, albeit he did have one game recently where he was making runs forward. We've never seen this from Ampadu in all the time that he's been at Leeds. It was quite impressive to watch, considering that we've never seen it until now. With Ampadu, he's had experience playing centre back as well. So you'd have Ampadu playing a very much a more defensive midfield role, giving Tanaka that free roam to be able to, to go almost like a box-to-box midfielder, if you like. He's dynamic enough, he's technical enough, and can certainly contribute both defensively and offensively. Can out Tanaka. So I think there's a possibility that partnership could work. Then up front, Joel Piroe hasn't had much of a look in really. He's always been behind Calvert-Lewin and Mecha, and when you consider how effective Piroe was last season, getting 20 goals in the Championship, you would think that he would have been due at least a little run in the team. The only problem is that in more recent times we've played with one up front. Piroe doesn't suit one up front. If he played in a two up front, I think you get the best out of Joel Piroe, personally. And then partnering him, Harry Gray. He's having a fantastic season in under 21 level. Is Harry at the minute. Again, if anyone's kind of wondering, yes, it's a picture of Archie Gray because Lineup Builder doesn't have a picture of Harry Gray just yet. It's the best I can do. You can tell they're brothers anyway just by looking at them. But yeah, Harry Gray up front. He's scored several goals and got several assists in the under 21s this season so far. And there's a possibility that maybe, if we're needing something completely different, bearing in mind most squads won't have the full detail of what Harry Gray is capable of yet, because all of his play has come at lower level. Could it be a little bit of a secret weapon to bring on with, quarter of an hour to go, 20 minutes to go? It's pointless bringing him on with 5 minutes to go because that don't give him enough time to get into the game. But he's a very intelligent striker, is Harry Gray. Very clinical finish on him usually. Doesn't miss much. Albeit he scored one and missed. He scored two and missed one. Maybe missing two in the last under 21 match. But the weather conditions were terrible for that match. Absolutely tipping down. But again, not using that as an excuse, but it does affect how players play football. That's just a fact. So again, realistically, like with all of this, would you have Piroe and Gray ahead of Mecha and Calvert-Lewin? Probably not, I would suggest at this stage. Would you have Ampadu and Tanaka ahead of Longstaff and Stack? Difficult one. You'd like to maybe think that maybe Longstaff and Tanaka could form a good partnership. But it ain't going to be often that Ethan Ampadu gets dropped. He's a good captain, but he's been making some errors recently. Would it hurt? Would it hurt to have Stack and Tanaka. Tanaka and Longstaff. And bearing in mind as well that there's two players that have missed out on both of these 11s, and that is Brendan Aronson and Ilya Gruev. Just purely because I'm only able to pick 22 players. And as I've already mentioned, the two goalkeepers in Melier and Cairns that have missed out. If you wanted a proper anchor man instead of Ampadu, if you don't trust Stack to do it, then Gruev's your man. From Aronson's point of view, he's currently deputising at right wing, which, while it's not his natural position, he's actually okay at right wing, and he's actually getting better. Like, there's a little bit more output, and a little bit more offensive play about Aronson's game on the right wing in recent times. When he first started playing on the right wing, he was a little bit subdued under Farke, and was obviously told just to play as defensive as possible, which I don't think has really helped Bogle's game, because Bogle hasn't been as effective going forward as they were last season. Again, you've got to put it in context. You're talking Premier League versus Championship. There is a massive difference there. So when it comes to the midfield, as I say, you could mix things up. When it comes to the wings, we've got enough wingers, to try things out. Got to get them fit first, so that's the massive thing. I haven't had them all fit all season. That's been the big problem. So yeah, there we have it, folks. It's a difficult one, is this? I don't even think that Daniel Farke knows what his best what his best 11 lineup is. If I was to reel one off for a 4-4-2 right now, I'd say Perry in goal, back four of Bogle, Roden, Strauch and Gudmundsson, midfield four. See, I like James. I like the pace. You can't teach pace, so I'd go James. I'd go James, Tanaka, Longstaff and Okafor, and then up front I'd probably have to go with Calvert-Lewin and Mecha. That would be the 4-4-2 that I would try if I was mixing these lineups up. Again, nothing against the likes of Gruev or Aronson or Melier or Cairns. They just wouldn't get into either of these two 11s in terms of how I've kind of structured these two 11s. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. What is Leeds United's best 11, and what is our best formation, more importantly? Could Leeds make the 4-4-2 work, or do modern formations make the 4-4-2 a dinosaur formation? Is there a way? For example, if we played Ampadu and Gruev as your two central mids, so you're playing two defensive mids in there, could you then potentially make the 4-4-2 work, as long as your two wingers and your full-backs and your strikers are all doing the offensive work going forward there? And then as defensive midfielders, they can sit back and protect your two centre-backs. So you've then effectively got four players defending the goal, whilst the other six, from an outfield point of view, are attacking. Could that work? Could that kind of system work? I think it could work. Do I think Farke will try it? Not a bloody chance. I think Farke is going to stick to the 4-3-3. At a squeeze, he might try the 4-2-3-1, but I would doubt it. He's stuck with his 4-3-3 all season long, and he seems reluctant to try changing anything, which is a shame. I don't want to see Farke sacked, but I need to see him try something different, because we have dropped points against... the points that we dropped against Fulham and Bournemouth, we shouldn't be dropping those. Conceding goals in the 90-something minute. It's game management, for Christ's sake. Just keep it solid, so solid that you can't concede. That's something that is coachable. You know, so we've dropped points there. We've got nothing against Burnley, nothing against Forest, and both of those are near the bottom. You know, so you could argue that's another 6 points dropped in the sense that we should have at least got a couple of draws. You know, it's against teams that are going to be in and around where we're going to be at end of the season. So it's two very disappointing losses there. And when you look at it, Fulham aren't doing all that great. So, you know, we should have, you know, when I say that we should have at least drawn that, maybe we should have even won that. If you're going to target teams that are going to be in and around you, or at least teams that are going to be bottom half for the season, if that's where you're going to get most of your points, well, you know. In terms of, you know, the fact that Leeds have got to play all these big teams coming up soon, well, big teams, you know what I mean. If Leeds actually turn this around and they actually get some points against these teams that they're not expected to get something from, we weren't expected to get anything from Tottenham. You know, and we played quite well in that match. We played well enough to get something from that, and it was a match that we didn't get anything, but we should have done, based on the performance in that match. There's a lot of work that's got to be done behind the scenes here. Farke and his coaching team have got to come up with something, because what Leeds fans are seeing right now ain't good enough. And as much as I don't want to see Farke sacked, you know, if Leeds are doing well, it means Farke's probably doing well. You know, you can't just, it's not a fluke. If Farke does well, there's a chance Leeds do well. You know, it goes hand in hand. It's like that. It's a club. It's a unit. You know, we are united. We are Leeds United, and we have to start playing for this. Start playing for this badge again. Because at the moment the performances aren't. You know, I would take a few crap performances if it yielded a few wins and draws, but we're not getting them either. We're getting losses, and we're getting too many. So things need to change, and they need to change quickly. We've not been in relegation zone yet, but we're going to be in that relegation zone if we don't start turning things around soon. I hope to God we turn it around. I really do. Do I think we can with the squad of players that we've got? Possibly. Do I think we need to strengthen in January? Yes. And if that means that certain players have to leave the club to allow for new ones to come in, then fine. I think Leeds will have to target the loan market. Personally, I think they will have to come up with a couple of very strategic loan signings. You know, they'll have to look at players that aren't necessarily playing that frequently, you know, for their clubs. There might be a couple of gems that you know, in recent seasons have played quite a lot, and they've just been pushed down the pecking order of these clubs that have already been established. Don't mean they won't be good enough for having a spell at Leeds. Take a look at them, try and get them. Because I don't think, unless, you know, when you look at the players that aren't playing, Gruev's not playing. We bought him for 5 million. How much of that 5 million can we recoup if we were to sell him? Piro's not playing. We signed him for 10 million. How much of that could we get back? You know, those are the two players that are playing the least out of the players that have been with the club the longest so far. You know, not taking into account the 10 the 10 new signings. You know, Meslier, we signed Meslier for 5 million. You know, how much of that could we recoup? So with this, then you sell Meslier for 5. Like if you could get back what we paid. So you got 5 million for Meslier, 5 million for Gruev, and 10 million for Piro. And out of all that, then, so you've got £20 million potentially to spend in January, right? You then look to get in a prolific striker and maybe a prolific winger or a prolific 10, also, you know, also a creative 10, whatever we feel we need at that point. And again, this is ambitious. Do I think that Leeds will go that ambitious in January? I think absolutely not. I'll be surprised if we bring anyone in. I mean, we need some reinforcements, but do I think we'll get anyone? No. Not anyone better than what we've got. So, this is going to be down to Farke getting the best out of these current players. Players like James and Nonto, who have hardly played recently, I think those two coming back could be really beneficial. I really do. I think we miss that attacking nous that Nonto possesses. We miss that pace, that raw, electric pace that Dan James provides. I think we need Tanaka to get back to that form that he showed last season. He was such a complete midfielder last season, was Tanaka. If we could get some of that back. And I know last season was the championship, but the squad has been in a Premier League environment now for 11 games. And it's not like there's no players in this league squad that have not played in the that have never played Premier League. We have got players that have played Premier League before. They've got the experience of playing in this league. So we need to see that experience come to the fore on the pitch. Look at the likes of Calvert-Lewin and Longstaff. They are highly experienced Premier League players. We need to see it. Dan James played a handful of games for Manua, for Christ's sake. Byram's played Premier League. Rodon played about a dozen games in the Premier League before now. Strout's played in Premier League with Leeds before now. Nonto's played in Premier League a little bit with Leeds. I mean, alright, he had a terrible season in terms of getting heavily relegated with a crap total, but Bogle's had a season in the Premier League. We're not without Premier League players. Darlow, I mean, Christ's sake, how long was he on the books at Newcastle? He got a handful of games in the Premier League. But again, we've signed players like Perry who are supposed to be better than him. So, I don't know. This is a difficult argument to put forward, really. And at the end of the day, we only Daniel Farke and his backroom team know exactly what's going on behind the scenes with the Leeds United players. Only they know how to get the best out of the current squad. There's nobody else coaching these players. So something's got to change. And we need to start getting results. I do not want to see us drop below that relegation zone line. I don't want to see us in the bottom three at any point this season. Wolves are doomed. West Ham have picked up some form. Forest have picked up some form. Burnley, they're very hit and miss. So you might be looking at Wolves and then Burnley and then one other. I do not want Leeds to be that one other. Fulham's form is crap right now. Maybe Fulham drop down there. I don't know. Crazy league. I thought we were going to see a little bit more regularity going into the Premier League. Usually it's the Championship that's the crazy league. I'd say Prem's almost equally as crazy. But I'll leave it there, folks. This has been a little bit of a ranty video in a way, and I think I just kind of need it because it's international break, and nobody likes international breaks. They're pointless, quite frankly. But anyway, big thank you for watching. Do please give the video a thumbs up, like. Do please hit the hype button as well. Do please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's going to be more football content, more Leeds United content, more video game content coming your way as well. Keep an eye out for everything going on with the WIRG League Cup. Competitors are currently doing some F0X this week, so keep an eye out for those. And the results show will happen this weekend as well. In the meantime, big thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye for now.